Okay, so I work at the Dutch version of Energie. And we have worked with big data for a couple of years, even before the term was hyped, so to say. Although I don't believe it's a hype, but the term itself. I wait just for the presentation. So I will talk about 3 applications that we worked on. A couple of them we saw earlier, mobile phone data, road sensor data, so the counts of vehicles, and the third one is social media that we also have seen before. So since a couple of months we have a new Director General, and he said, okay, it's fun all those research on big data, please give me just one statistics made of big data and for official publication. And for that purpose we used road sensor, the road sensors to count vehicles, to produce traffic index numbers, because that was the least sensitive data, so no privacy issues involved, etc. So it was most easiest for us. But the other ones are continuing as well. And I will talk something about data visualization, especially of large data sets. A little bit less scientific than Andrew and Mike has shown, but more from a practical kind of viewpoint. Okay, there it is. Ready. Okay, good, thanks. Okay, great. Okay, yeah. So at official statistics, we have 3 kinds of data sources. Traditionally, survey data, administrative data, especially in Scandinavian countries, they're used a lot. Also in the Netherlands, for instance, tax office data. And the third data source that we're exploring right now is big data. And I tend to define it as machine-generated data of events. So the events are produced by humans, so Twitter, mobile phone, etc. But machines are sensors, gather those data, and we try to create statistics out of it. Okay, so these are the 3 case studies I talked about, and I also show some visualization methods. This is Tableplot. It's the whole Dutch census into one graph. So, it's indeed very fast. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what I found out is, although those case studies are differently, I have some kind of universal workflow that we used for each of the 3 case studies. And it's about the big data. It's about on individual level. So for instance, a CDR or all tweets. And what we then want is we don't want those individual records. We want some kind of data that we can work on. So this process is called data jujitsu, for instance, also known as data pre-processing, data munching, crunching, whatever. Yeah, it's everything that can be done with data. So editing, restructuring, transforming, combining, filtering, aggregating, and the last one is very interesting because by aggregating data, you may lose the privacy issues that you have when you worked on this data, raw data. So especially mobile phones data. I'll show you in a second. If we trace each individual, that isn't very good. But if we have like counts, like for instance 50 persons are using a cell phone in a certain region, that's okay. That's okay for privacy issues, but it should not boil down to a single person. And after this process, we obtain the data cubes. Why cubes? Often have 3 dimensions. Most of them a time dimension. These are some examples. Also some x, y. It could be geographical. And from that you can run your models, whether they are statistical or machine learning, to obtain some estimations. So the first case study is social media. We work with an intermediate company called Custo that gathered messages from all kinds of social media, so Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. We determine the sentiment. It's very basic. It's not very basic, just the sentiment of a single word. So happy as a positive sentiment and fired as a negative sentiment. And what we're trying to find out whether it could be used for an indicator for the business cycle. You can Google business cycle statistics Netherlands, and you find a nice animated graph of indicators that indicates the economic growth, the crisis, and consumer confidence turned out to be a main indicator, a primary indicator. So we wanted to mimic this indicator by using social media messages. And we found out that this is a sentiment of all social media messages, and the green ones are daily basis, the red points are weekly basis, and the black squares are a monthly basis. And you see that is smooth, therefore. So, and this is the consumer confidence. So on the eye, it looks pretty similar. And we filtered the old messages by taking some keywords that were related to consumer confidence, because we don't want the Happy New Year messages to be involved here. And if you split it by social media, you see that Facebook has the best kind of correlation. And you also see, if you look at the numbers, you see correlation coefficient of 0.81, so it's pretty high, and also co-integrates with consumer confidence. So we can use, we can use social media for predicting the business cycle to some extent. So the second case study is mobile phone data. So we had a pilot with one provider that has a market share of 1/3 in the Netherlands. And indeed we used aggregated data. So aggregated per municipality, per 1 hour time frame. And possible applications for this kind of data is data population. So we know where people live during the night, at least where they're registered as residents. But we also are maybe even more interested in where people are during daytime. So you would expect working cities to be a higher population, whether commuting towns will have a less populated crowd during daytime. And first we looked at a representativity of those data. And the blue lines, this is for male and this is for female, is the distribution of the Dutch population by age. And the red lines are from the mobile phone operator, some sample of their customary data. And we see that, say, between 20 and 70 years old, it had 60 years old. It has quite a good coverage. So these are relative plots, by the way. Of course, the red line absolute value should be lower. But you see the problem here with children and with elderly people. I have to say, with children, at least teenagers, they often have a subscription on name of one of their parents. So if we take into account, we can say, okay, primary school children and younger, they are underrepresented, representative, and older children do have mobile phones and use them. So what we did is we took the same distribution of the Dutch population and cut it into 3 parts. The main part, of which we assume people use mobile phones. Elderly part, for which we assume they don't have mobile phones. So the older part of the population is split in 2, so based on some kind of normal, commutative normal distribution. And for the children without mobile phones, we also assume that they don't use mobile phones. So we weight this part, the middle part, with mobile phone data. And for the children, we use municipality data and education registers, because we know where in the Netherlands where primary schools are. We know how many children per school there are. So we have the location. So we can use that information as auxiliary information. And for the for the elderly part, we assume that they are always in their own municipality, because we don't have any better information sources. This is the raw data for 1 month, May 2013. And see here's the time, and this is the day. So this is from 1st of May to the 31st of May, and this is from 12 o'clock at night. This is morning, afternoon, evening. So this is a heat map showing the darker the colors, the more mobile phones are used. But you see some kind of patterns going on, especially at each 6 hours. And it's caused by data synchronization, automatic data synchronization. So we have an aggregated table. That's this one, and we edited a bit. And this is a system failure on national level. So, and the weighting method itself is pretty linear, pretty straightforward. So we know, for instance, in Amsterdam, there live 800,000 people. We counted the number of unique mobile phone devices, and we weight them up, simply. And if we do that for all municipalities, we can add them up and we obtain the data population. So this kind of figures are a resulting product of that. You see the dots are the Dutch populations totals, and the bars are, so for instance, Amsterdam has 800,000 inhabitants, while during a typical workday at noon there are over 1 million. You see Almere is a commuter town, although it's a city in bloom, and you see the Dutch National Airport also has a lot of foreigners. Okay, so this is an animation that shows the data population during the day. And you see that all the large cities, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Eindhoven, they really become more populated, so more reddish, while the commuter towns become blue, so they become less populated during typical working day. And often I find these kind of small multiples more useful, because you see the pattern going on during the day in one single picture. And if you zoom in on Eindhoven, it's a classic example, because city has lots of high-tech companies, and elsewhere there's nothing of the typical commuter towns surrounded. There are 2 neighboring municipalities that also have a lot of high-tech companies, so it's also red during daytime. And I also applied some k-means clustering based on the patterns during 1 month data. So it's May, so I had Holy Thursday, May holiday, Liberation Day, I guess, yeah. And you see that that the red areas are indeed classified as working region, busy working regions, while for instance green are recreational regions. So they have a higher datum population during weekends and holidays than during working days. Okay. The third and last application is road sensors. So they look like this, but they can also be cameras. And they count the number of vehicles each minute, and there are 20k loops in the Netherlands, still growing, of course, this number. So it's yeah, kind of a big data source, and it's a very nice source for transport and traffic statistics. And this is a closer look at 3 highways in the Netherlands. And you see that the road sensors are pretty uniformly distributed, although it is not the case in less populated regions. And what I did is some kind of very pragmatic, as I understood, topological data analysis. Although I couldn't have a better introduction this morning. But what we would like is the traffic to measure the traffic on each highway over time. So longitudinal data set we would want to obtain. And this is this is for the whole Netherlands, and this is what the data looks like over a day. So you see that there is a morning rush hour and an evening rush hour. The points over here are sensors that have some kind of failure, technical issues. So they don't record each minute. And this is some kind of data editing. And this is very interesting because we also can classify the vehicles based on length. So you see the small vehicles have a typical rush hour at between 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning, and evening rush hour at 5. But the long vehicles, they have a rush hour earlier because they want to avoid the traffic jams. And also they especially drive during daytime, middle of the day. And the mid-gray line are the medium, the vans, the kind of things, small trucks. So again, small multiples to see whether days are typical working days, so from Monday to Friday. There's of course a lot of more activity going on. So in general, some kind of methodological points. So big data may be very selective. Because for instance, mobile phone data, not everyone uses mobile phones. Many people have more than one mobile phone, so and you only have a part of the population that you measure with the data. And also the measurement mechanism may be selective in case of the road sensors. In In the cities, there are many road sensors, while in less populated areas are less road sensors. So we have to cope with that to produce statistics. Important is that we measure events. So, for instance, calls or the number of vehicles that pass by, and we want to relate it with units. Most of the time persons, but in case of the road sensors, segments of highways, so to say. So the density per kilometer highway, for instance. With social media, of course, you want to relate it to persons. So you need some kind of background characteristics, in most ideal case. And some predictive modeling. Machine learning tools, for instance, may be applicable for that. So finally, some thoughts about data visualization, especially for large data sets. So there are the famous 3 V's. For large volume data, I recommend, for instance, data binning. It's just you have some kind of data source and just split it into, say, 100 groups. So it's also, for instance, histogram. You split it into, for instance, 30, so a good starting value. So that's bottom up, but you can also define it top down. Aggregation, where you have some kind of defined aggregation groups. So, for instance, regions or economic activity, for instance. Regarding high velocity, for instance, animations, dashboards, small multiples often work well. And for large variety, interactive interfaces, so that data analysis can play with the data and see all those viewpoints. And I want to conclude this talk with 3 graphs. This is a Tableplot of the Dutch census, and it's the data sorted by age. So the first column is age, numeric variable. The first row are the 1% oldest people, and the second row, the second percentage oldest people, etc. You see here age on a categorical representation, so decades, so 0 to 9, 10 to 19, etc. So you see also the distribution between one bin, within one bin. So you see that half of those bin is older than 90 years old, and a very small part is older than 100 years old. You see the gender, more often female within the oldest part of the population. Marital status, so this is widowed, blue, pink is divorced, etc. So you see the profiling of the Dutch population within one picture. And we use it for especially data inspection. I mean, for instance, education. It's not being registered for the older people, because we only have this education registrations, I think 2 decades. So that's already an issue. Another issue is for people less than 15 years old, it's not applicable, because they have education at the moment. But you see, for babies, those are missing values rather than not applicable. So somebody is forgotten to put a stamp on that, not applicable. I'll give you some references at the end, so you can read it in detail by yourself. This is a Treemap, very nice for hierarchical data. So this is not big data, but just structural business statistics. So the larger rectangles are main economic sectors. So, for instance, construction, information and communication, and the rectangles are nested. So within, for instance, transportation and storage, this rectangle, you have, for instance, air transport. And you can assign colors to whatever you like. I chose in this graph the color. Okay, so I forgot to say the size of the rectangle represents the number of employees in each economic sector. And the color says whether there is a growth with respect to last year or a shrinkage. So the green rectangles, for instance, this one, more people work this year than previously a year. So it's a very useful tool to investigate those kind of data, especially if it's interactive. You can zoom in and have a deeper level of those economic activities classification. Finally, a heat map. Income statistics, female. So you see age here and income over here. And you see that there are a lot of people who work at a minimum income level in their teenage times. You see that that income doesn't grow, especially because women they get children and work part-time since then. And you see the retirement age of 65, being 66 right now, but you see there also, and this are the retirement funds that they get. So finally, some references. Not sure this presentation is shared. So, by the way, there's most of the visualizations. This one and this one are created in R. I use that a lot. These are also made by packages that I wrote. So, Treemap, and this is Tableplot. So they're also listed, I guess, yeah, listed over here. So, okay, thank you very much.